Hey there guys, in today's video, I am going to be having a discussion with my friend Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves. You may know her. She is an internationally acclaimed enrichment specialist. She is co-owner of the Leather Elves, one of the best parrot toy making companies that I have encountered. And in this video, we are going to talk about what to expect at a vet visit because a lot of people just don't know what to expect. So we're going to be covering topics such as when should you go to the vet, how do you get to the vet, and what to expect once you get there. Plus, we are going to provide a little bit of information on what to expect during the pandemic because the protocols for most vet offices have changed. So if that sort of information is useful to you, you want to make sure to stick around because that's going to be coming up right after this.
Hi, and welcome to Flock Talk with Robin and Jack. I'm Robin Sullivan from the Leather Elves, and this is Jack Pine from High Redbird. Hey, Jack.
Hey Robin, how you
How
doing?
are you? Doing good. It's snowing still. It snows every day here, so we just kind of live with that. Um, so this week is a little different from what we usually do. We're going to talk about what to expect at a vet visit. Um, it's you know it's things are a little different everywhere, but I think overall we've all kind of had similar experiences when it comes to going to the vet. So Jack, we've talked a lot about why vet care is so important, and I think it's critical. We talk about being responsible pet bird owners and responsible bird care professionals. And one of the things that comes to mind right out of the gate is vet care. So, for you at the farm, how do you guys handle vet care?
So, um, so it depends on the animal, because we utilize a variety of different vets. Some of our vets have different specialties. So we'll use different vets for the camels compared to the goats, compared to the parrots, compared to the reptiles. Some of the vets will make visits to us. Some of them we have to go into their facility to have the animals treated. So it really does depend on the individual animal you are working with. Because I am working with a pretty wide collection of animals, I get to deal with a pretty wide collection of veterinarians. But I think it really does drive home that no matter what your circumstances, no matter what animals you have at home, you can find something that should work for your setup.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things to think about is that birds often mask illness. They're a prey species. We've talked about that numerous times. And that you may not know until it's pretty serious when you're talking about a bird and illness. Have you seen that? I know I have.
Yes. Yeah. So birds don't want you to notice if they're not feeling well. They don't want you to notice if they have a limp, if they are starting to drop weight. So they are gonna not only not show things, but they are going to actively try to disguise symptoms if there is someone else around, and that could include you. So I think vet care is important because veterinary medicine and the metrics that vets use to determine health and well-being are uh, by and large objective. You can say, oh, that animal looks okay, it doesn't look okay. Especially with a dog and cat, you can use that as an assessment. For birds, you're going to be using things like weight, you're going to be using blood values, and the bird can't hide those things. Those are one of the few things that the bird can't hide. So that's why those values are so important.
I think even though, with weight gain or weight loss, sometimes the fluffy feathers you don't notice. If you have a bird that's really well feathered, you don't, it's not a bird that's a, over preener or plucker, or a bird that has mutilated in the past, you may not notice because there's that lovely feather coverage that's just taking care of all of that. So you got to remember that weight gain and loss can definitely make a difference, and you may not pick up on it right away. Hi,
Yeah,
everybody who's tuning in. Just Julie, Quentin, Melissa, everybody, thank you for being here. Um, what about, so, one of the things we've talked about is birds that toss food, or birds that you know pick through the food and pick the purple pellets only, or will only eat the red ones. So for me, that's an issue when you're looking at, well, my bird's eating fine. So I mean, sometimes you don't know, and I think that's
yeah,
something to think
yeah. I would definitely agree that that can be a potential problem. Uh, we find that with our birds, just like us, they pick and choose what they want to eat. They're usually going to go for the things that are the highest value for them. Um, and they may just toss everything else aside. And if that's the case, you could say, here, my bird ate its entire diet, when realistically, it threw three-quarters of the diet onto the ground. So again, if you're getting weights on your bird and your bird is maintaining its weight, maybe you can cut back on your diet so you don't clean up as much. But having that weight as an objective measurement of the well-being of your bird, I would say, is critical in knowing how to make that decision, because you wouldn't want to cut back food from a bird that needs increased nourishment. And
right.
the way that birds hold their feathers can control how we're looking at them. The time of year. If your birds, I mean, you have snow. You probably don't have parrots that are outside right now. But on the Gulf Coast, I have birds that, as long as they have a windbreak, if they have an enclosed nest box that they can go into, they can stay outside year round. But they do put on a thicker layer of downy feathers in the winter. So that can have an impact on how they're looking. If your birds fly, that's going to determine the muscle tone that they use. How much they fly is going to determine how much muscle tone they develop, which can also affect if they're looking a little chubby or not.
Nice job, Melissa. Melissa says she weighs Zorro almost daily. It's an amazing skill. It's a great piece of training to do with your birds. And Quentin brought up a good point too. Quentin said if they're sleeping a lot, that can be a sign. And which brings me to, you really need to observe your birds. You need to know what's the norm. For an older bird, maybe they're not moving around the cage as much as they used to. For a younger bird, you're going to see a lot of movement. If they're sleeping a lot, it's just kind of a tip that, oh, that's a little more than usual. That's not, what I'm used to. The other piece of behavior is, I think we all know, if we don't feel good, we're kind of cranky. I know Jack is. So if your bird's kind of getting nippier than usual, or doing a stereotypical behavior or repetitive behavior that you haven't seen before, it could be a medical issue, and you need to be aware. Um, Jack, so we've talked about pluckers before too, and I think people who have a bird that's over preening or that's plucking, you want to look into, is it a medical issue before you just jump to its behavioral. So I think there are so many reasons why you need to go to the vet. um, and the other thing is, you've got to find a good vet. I mean, Jack mentioned that there are different vets with different specialties. There are avian, there are certified avian vets. There are vets who have a ton of avian experience but may not be certified. And I think that's so important. I mean, Jack, what would you suggest people do to find a vet? I mean, Yellow Pages. Oh
So
wait, no, we don't have Yellow Pages anymore.
I know, and I'm so upset about it because phone books were amazing enrichment. Uh,
Right. Very good.
I would recommend for a lot of people, maybe you live in a smaller town, maybe you don't have as many options. I mean, I'm in Houston, I have pretty much as many vets as I could ever want. So, first of all, you just have to go through and see what your options are in terms of veterinarians. I do want to point out at this time that you may also want to take a look at what your options are for emergency veterinarians, because you may have an emergency in the middle of the night. Maybe your bird has a broken blood feather and you're not comfortable pulling the remainder of that feather shaft, but that's an issue that needs to be dealt with really quickly. So you may need an emergency vet, and it may not be the vet that you use as your regular veterinarian, and that's fine. But I definitely recommend finding that information before you need it, because
Mhm.
obviously, if you have a bird with a broken blood feather, your attention is going to be on that bird, and it's going to be a lot harder for you to find a vet and you know see is this a good vet for birds. My biggest piece of advice for people when getting a new veterinarian is to find a vet that you are comfortable talking to. Uh, for a
Mhm.
lot of people, I like to tell them, and then I realize that this is a problem for people too. Um, your veterinarian should be like your doctor. You shouldn't have a problem discussing different things with them. If there are areas of concern, you should feel comfortable talking about these. But then I realized that a lot of people are not particularly comfortable talking to their own doctors. So I think it's really important to I think it's really important to provide that understanding for people, that they need to be comfortable with their uh, with talking to their veterinarian. And please tell me that Nick didn't just do that to mess with me, and that everybody else saw Bernie Sanders in his chair sitting over my shoulder.
What, Bernie?
Sometimes he can be difficult to talk to.
So
Oh,
true, and I think you've got to treat it as though the other thing about vets is vets are often put on a pedestal, and yes, they've gone to school a lot longer than some of us, um, and put in all those hours, but at the same time they're human beings, and they're in this because they care about the birds. They care about animals in general, and you can pick that up right away when you go to a new vet. And if you're not comfortable, um, it's not going to be successful. Quentin says he asked his vet who to contact during their off hours, and they gave him recommendations. That's great advice, because then you've got backup. So okay, maybe I can't talk to my favorite vet, but I can at least get some good advice or counsel in an emergency. So
well, and that touches
go
on
ahead.
so many different points for a veterinarian. If you're brand new to birds, if you don't really know what information to take as gospel, what information is just someone's opinion on the internet, having a veterinarian as a sounding board can help you come up with appropriate diet for your animal, appropriate housing, appropriate enrichment. So a vet can help you provide so many different things.
Oh, definitely. And, I think I can't tell you how many times I see, and I'm sure you all do too, on Facebook, people saying, my bird's doing this, this, and this. Is this important? Is this like a crisis? Is this an emergency? Oh, I don't have a vet. Can anybody recommend a vet? Well, honestly, at that point in time, you should already have a vet, or at least know who's in your area, because you don't want to have to be figuring that out, you know? And I think the question of when do I go to the vet it comes up all the time too. It's really important that when you get a new bird, you you do quarantine. Okay, we all know quarantine now, right? We all learned that in 2020. But it's the same deal with our birds. And as animal care professionals, we've been doing quarantine forever, you know. And so, Jeff, long do you, if you get a new bird into your flock or into the flock at the farm, how long do you do a quarantine for?
So, um, and quarantine, it sounds scary. It's really not. For a
Mhm.
bird, I am typically going to quarantine a bird for 30 days. Now, what that entails is that bird will be, even if I am planning for that parrot to eventually join like my mixed species aviary, it's going to be in a cage, separate from there, where I can monitor its behavior, I can monitor its food consumption, I can collect fecal samples to ensure that it won't be introducing any parasites or anything else into that flock of birds. And I would say that that quarantine is going to be 30 days, at least 30 days. And if there are anything else with that bird that gives me reservation about introducing it to a flock of animals, if perhaps its fecals don't look quite right, or I'm worried about its food consumption, then of course we're going to seek a veterinary consult, and it won't be released from quarantine until it is cleared by that veterinarian.
Right, absolutely. And I think, it's just good practice to do that, to make sure you've got a vet. And a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I got this bird from, Mary Sue down the street, and I know that she took good care of it, and so I'm just going to go with that, and I know that it's healthy." Well, you've got to be sure that Mary Sue thought of all the things we just talked about, 2 minutes ago, that all these different things that may have come up that may not have been caught by the previous owner. And so a vet visit for any new animals is crucial. I mean, the
Well,
other, go ahead.
I was going to say I have gotten birds from people that I know have decades of experience. I completely trust the way that they care for their birds. I know they take the the highest possible quality of care of their birds, and I still quarantine them because, in the grand scheme of things, that month of being safe is far easier than on the off chance that that bird did have something that it introduced, and I now have to treat an entire flock of birds. I
Right.
definitely rather deal with just the one bird.
And I think too, annual exams are absolutely essential. It's not something that you go, oh, well, he's doing fine, I'm not going to take him in, I don't have to. Annual exams are without a doubt something that every good bird owner should be doing. Quentin says he's had people ask him about having bird play dates. No thanks, I don't know you or the birds. It's why take that chance? I mean, unless this is a bird that you're in the same house and somebody else owns him, it doesn't, there's really no need for it. I mean, we've talked about, you're the flock, you're filling in that social need by providing good enrichment. So really, no, there's no need for play dates. If you meet up in the park and everybody's doing outreach when life goes back to normal, that's a little different. But I think it's really, or to a place that's familiar. Otherwise, nah, why bother? Why do it? Um, the other reason you need to go to the vet, acute illness or injury. Jack mentioned pulling blood feathers. It's We've done that a bajillion times, I'm sure. It's not in current literature. It's not being recommended unless there's something unusual about it or there's an excessive blood loss. So if you don't know what you're doing with pulling a blood feather, it's probably best to go seek professional help. It because
Right.
it's not. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and you can talk to your vet about that. You can possibly either develop your skills, maybe they're comfortable with teaching you how to do those things, and maybe they would say, no, we'd really rather you just come in because, something like that on a bird can, it's not that difficult a concept, but blood loss on a animal that doesn't have that much blood to start with can quickly become problematic. So maybe your vet does just want you to come in if they break a blood feather, if they break a nail, and have excessive bleeding from one of their nails. And all of those things can happen just in the normal scheme of how your day is going. It doesn't take a catastrophic accident to cause one of these things. It could be that your bird, grabbed for something, slipped, and fell to the bottom of their cage, and then they damaged a feather, damaged a nail. So you
Absolutely.
need to talk to your vet about those things.
So, okay, so we've established you going at least once a year, doing a vet check before you introduce a bird to your flock, a new bird, and doing some quarantine. And like Julie says, a baseline health check. It's a good starting point. When you get a new bird, it's nice to know, okay, this is where I'm at. If things change, I'll know that this isn't like what's been going on all the time. And so, Quentin's got a question. What's the best thing to use when pulling a blood feather and the blood won't stop? Quick stop can burn skin. Yeah, definitely. You don't ever want to use quick stop on skin. That's just, yeah, it's a horror show. And it's a common mistake that gets made. So Jack, what would you suggest? Pull a blood feather and the blood won't stop.
One of my favorite things, just because I've used it on myself, because I I do things like that because I want to know what my animals are going to be experiencing. I want to know if one of their medications tastes absolutely awful. I want to know things like that. Cornstarch is a really good coagulant that does not, it doesn't burn, it doesn't itch, it doesn't really have any irritation. The other thing you're going to have to do with a blood, if you pull a blood feather and there is still bleeding, you may, you need to take a look at that feather shaft because it could be that part of the feather shaft is still in that follicle. And if that's the case, that would require veterinary intervention. But when you do the the cornstarch to coagulate that blood flow, you're also going to need to apply pressure. And it's probably going to be a little more pressure than your bird is immediately comfortable with. They may be like, "Hey, don't touch me that hard." But it's in the name of stopping the blood flow. If you're able to use the cornstarch and apply that pressure, the bleeding should slow down immensely in less than a minute. If you are still having issues with that, again, I would say that's a time to go to the veterinarian.
Yeah, I mean, pulling a blood feather is not, like Jack said, if you've been doing it forever and ever, not so bad, but really not for a novice bird owner or even someone who's never had it happen before. It's just not something you want to mess with. It's really not. So, okay, so we know when to go to the vet, but now what are we going to do before we go? I think there's a list of things that you should kind of prep for before you go to the vet. It's only fair to those vets who spend all that time, taking care of animals and getting their degrees. It's only fair that I think our birds are prepared before we go. So, Jack, I think step up training obviously is kind of important. You
Yes.
got that bird that will
Um,
step up to a perch. It doesn't have to
yeah.
be
So
your hand.
stepping up to a perch is just as useful. And I would just say that if that is what you have as your setup, if your bird doesn't like hands, but they'll step up to a perch, let your veterinarian know when they're working with that bird because they will have perches available. If you have a preferred perch, I have a bird, a blue fronted Amazon. He is, almost 40 years old. He doesn't really like he'll step up on hands, but he doesn't really like it. He loves stepping up on a perch. So at this point, it's just easier to get him to step up on the perch. And he does have a preferred perch. So it just lives on a hook next to his cage. And the only thing that perch does is help me get that bird out of his enclosure. So just let your veterinarian know what that bird is more comfortable with, but either a step up to a hand, some like a forearm, some like a perch. As long as your veterinarian knows how to interact with that bird, you've then given them a really easy way to pick up, move that bird around. You've given yourself a really easy way to pick up, move that bird around. So everybody wins.
Definitely. And I think, you want to set yourself, your bird, and your veterinarian up for success. You don't want this to be a nightmare every time you've got to go to the vets. And we've talked about, building up that trust relationship. If you build and build and build, and then going to the vet turns into a nightmare, you're going to like lose some of that trust. And so if you do these things ahead of time, you get prepared, it makes life so much easier. Quentin suggested cage training. So yeah, crate training. Crate training is, it feels like it's a difficult thing to do, but if you set the situation up correctly from the beginning, crate training is a fabulous skill to have, so that it's not the jamming the bird into the cage before we get to the vet, and then the bird's in there and you're driving to the vet and it's a bad situation. Now you open the crate, the bird comes flying out. Crate training fixes all of that.
Yeah, and if you start before you need that behavior, you have the ability to control how your bird is going to view that. If you wait until the last minute, it's like, oh, I have to be at the vet in 15 minutes. Let me grab the bird and shove him in the cage. Well, obviously, that's a negative, traumatic experience. If you start working with it, you know, days or weeks in advance, you can get a bird comfortable with going into a crate without you picking it up and moving it. Grayson, the umbrella cockatoo that I've shown on here a couple of different times, he knows, go to your cage, he will climb down his enclosure, walk and climb into his travel carrier, because I get to use that behavior for when we're doing outreach with children, which we will hopefully do again soon. But again, anytime we go to the veterinarian, he gets into that crate really easily. And I think at this point, it's important to point out that when you are going to the veterinarian, I cannot recommend enough. Your bird should be in a crate. I know some people are really comfortable with their bird. They'll say, oh, I can just walk in with him on my shoulder, on my arm. And the thing I want to point out there is that you don't necessarily know what to expect when you walk into a vet's office. Is there going to be a dog or a cat that your bird is not familiar with, not comfortable with? Is your bird going to try to fly away? Anything like that, which is not only potentially detrimental to your bird, but any of the other animals that are at the vet clinic that day as well. So by having your animal crate trained, comfortable being in a crate, you really just help everyone out with that.
I think it's for your safety, for your bird safety, for the safety of the other animals that are at the vets. It's just crate training really works. And Melissa says that Zorro goes in once a month to the cage once a month, or so he's pretty good. He doesn't go in by himself, but he cooperates. Well, Melissa, I've seen you doing great training on Facebook, so I think this is the next step. I think you can do crate training with Zorro, and I would be happy to work with you on that. So we'll talk later. Towel training, Jack. I think, I was talking to someone that I'm doing some consulting with, and she said she took the bird to the vet, and the vet tech toweled the bird, and then the bird got away. So this is a bird that has to go to the vet really frequently, and not a good situation. So I think towel training is another skill that people definitely should consider working on ahead of time.
Yeah, and so I showed you guys, I just raised some green cheek conures, and I gave you guys weekly updates on as I was hand feeding them, working with them, and I showed that one of the things I start doing when they are, 5 to 6 weeks old is using a dish towel as a form of play. We cover the bird, we uncover the bird, it's a whole lot of fun, but then the bird is not scared of the towel or anything else that could then be used as a restraint device down the road. So I would encourage people to look at play. You don't need to be scaring your bird, traumatizing your bird, even if you have this behavior that you want to train that is maybe not as comfortable for the bird. I mean, I don't think most of our birds would, from Jump Street, willingly volunteer to just roll up in a towel and be restrained. But you can work with them and then get them to that point really easily, as long as you have it set in appropriate approximations.
Yeah, and a lot of the training that we talk to people about, a lot of my strategy for new trainers is make it a game. Engage with, you're trying to build that trust relationship, engage with that bird, get them invested, and then, okay, now we can move on to a little bit more difficult. We can move on to something that might not be super comfortable. And then, which leads to the point that not all vet visits are going to go smoothly. I think you've got to be aware that in an emergency situation, your bird's probably not going to do all the things, all the wonderful things that you have trained them to do. And you've got to just know that getting to the vet is sometimes the most important thing, not he did the crate, enter the crate correctly. He let me towel him. Sometimes it's a grab and go. And that's the bottom line. So, you know what, Jack? Another thing that I thought about with going to the vets is having your records with you, being prepared to go. And so Leather Elves does an emergency kit. It's got, stuff in it that really helps with that. If you just grab it and go to the vet, it's got quick stop in it. It's got, vet wrap. It's got things to immobilize if you have to. It's got a syringe. And so I want to give one of those away. And I should also let people know that I only have 22 of them left. So until it's true, I got to get all the new stuff in, but I've got 22 kits left. And they're going to be marked down on our site to $44.99 from a usual $59.99. Okay, so if anybody wants to get one of those, they are on sale, and they're great to keep all your records in. And then you take it and you go, okay, look, here's where he was last time we came. Here's what's going on. Here are his medical records. And then the vet has that baseline right there if it's maybe a new vet or it's, a little different situation. So here's my question. First person to answer this, and I'm going to count on Nick to tell me who it is. What does AAV stand for? Association of Awesome Vacuums? No. Let's see.
Well, and while people are adding in and answering, I do want to point out a couple of things that I do really like about your Emergency Essentials kit. So one, you take the guesswork out of it for a lot of people. So the basic first aid things that people could need in an emergency situation, they're going to be included in the kit. And the kit also gives people the ability to have everything together in one place. Because I can tell you right now, from experience, knowing where all of your supplies are when you are dealing with an emergency is incredible peace of mind. You don't ever want to be searching for something that you need. So having everything together in one spot is awesome. And I think you put together an awesome product.
Thank you very much. It's nice to know where you can put your hands on it. So Avon McCall, I think, Nick, is that what we're seeing here?
Yep, Dawn does have it.
All right, Dawn. And I think Dawn is in the snow belt with me as well. I think Dawn's up this way. So nice, I can save on shipping. All right, so Dawn, if you, after this, message me your address and we will get the Emergency Essentials kit out to you. Good job. All right. So Julie, what's with the typos? Come on, you got to get a little quicker here. I don't know. Because before you were calling them ass, I don't know. I don't know have against your avian bed. Anyway, I'm teasing, Julie. You know that. So we went to some vet. We talked to some vets, and a vet who has been a colleague and friend for a long time is Dr. Annalise Strunk. And Annalise is at the Center for Bird and Exotic Medicine in Bothell, Washington. And Annalise was nice enough to record for us what she would like to see from her avian customers. So, Nick, can we maybe play the clip of Dr. Strunk?
Hi there. I'm Annalisa Strunk. I am an avian and exotic veterinarian in the Seattle area in Washington. I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk to you about how important it is to bring birds to your veterinarian and what our expectations are and our hopes. And we do feel it's really important for birds to be seen at least on an annual basis. I really appreciate the ability to do examinations on birds at least every 6 months. Getting our hands onto birds gives us a chance to try to find things that might be hidden. Birds are really good at hiding it when they're sick. So the exam is the most important part. I can evaluate eyes, ears, look in the mouth, feel body condition, listen for any signs of heart murmurs or arrhythmias, and feel for any musculoskeletal issues, development of arthritis, that sort of thing. And then at least yearly, I recommend doing blood work. And that tells us other things that, again, birds might be hiding, looking for signs of anemia, checking kidney function, liver function, that sort of thing. And that gives us a really good idea of things that are going on behind the scenes. And if we can catch stuff early, it gives us a chance to intervene and help birds live longer, healthier lives. Another thing that we might recommend is x-rays. And that's something that I usually recommend as birds start to get a bit older, because it is a good idea to screen for things like hardening of the arteries or arthritis. Again, because birds like to hide it when they're sick or having developing issues. So that's something to consider. What I love for owners to do prior to a bird's visit is work on training. I love it when birds are able to step up. I love when birds have been trained to accept being held gently in a towel and have a structured plan for training. I really think it's great when owners can bring a towel that a bird is used to. I like when owners bring reinforcement tools. So if there's a particular treat or thing to say, I really like to have good communication with clients to make the visit as minimally stressful as possible on our bird friend. And I just want you to know that we are dedicated to trying to minimize stress. And to that end, my colleagues and I have put together a program for fear-free training for veterinary professionals, because it is just really important to get the word out that birds need to have positive experiences at their vet hospital. So anyhow, I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to entertain those at some time in the future. Thank you.
I just love Dr. Strunk. She's very real. She's easy to talk to. And I know a lot of people who have seen her at her clinic, and she's very understanding. She's open to questions. And I got to say, I feel kind of reinforced myself. And don't you, Jack, that she pretty much said a lot of what we said before, as far as what she likes to see when people bring their birds in. And you know, the communication piece, I think, is something that we forget about, or we don't always consider that when talking to a professional. It can be overwhelming. All right. So I want to definitely thank Dr. Strunk for that, and also thank her and her colleague, Dr. McLaughlin, and Barbara Heidenreich for working on that fear-free vet techniques. I think it's an amazing movement, and I think that people really should talk to their vets about it, if it's just to make sure it's something that that the vets know is out there and available to them. You can make those kind of suggestions to vets. you may have seen something that they didn't. So you can definitely make those kind of suggestions. So, all right, Jack. So now we want to talk about what to expect at the vet. All kinds of things. So, and Dr. Strunk also touched on some of that too, a visual exam. So we need to be there, if we can be there and let the doctors know, oh, that's a little different. And then the doctors can tell you what they're seeing.
Yeah, I would say for animals, change is going to be one of the main things that you need to pay attention to. So if your animal is at a consistent weight, you can let your vet know that. But obviously, if there's a massive change, either my animal dropped a lot of weight or my animal put on a lot of weight, that's definitely something that you want to make sure that your vet knows about. And realistically, that would probably be a good reason to make that vet visit appointment to begin with. So letting the vet know about things like that. And the vet, like Dr. Strunk said, is going to be looking at things, it basically it's the same things that I teach my team. So on an animal, you want to look at all of the openings to the body. So eyes, ears, mouth, the vent, the back end of the animal is going to tell you a lot of information about that animal. And then you also just want to look at things that might change. So weight can change, behavior can change, appetite can change. So those are all going to be important things for your vet to know about and things they'll be looking for on a visit.
Karen brings up a great point here. Video or still pictures can be really valuable if you can get them, especially if symptoms are sporadic or difficult to describe. So important. I mean, it's like, when you've got that animal that you're seeing something and you're like, I know that's not right. And then you don't see it all the time. But then it happens again. And it may not happen when you're at the vet. It may be, it's like, when you say something hurts and you go to the doctor and then it just stops hurting. When you go to the dentist and the toothache goes away, it's the same thing with our birds, and now, so at home, they're comfortable with you. So if they're masking with you and you're only seeing something sporadically, and now you're taking them someplace that's a little bit more stressful, they're going to mask even more. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate that.
And I think another thing that's important to address there is that if it's you and you go to the doctor, even if those symptoms aren't manifesting, you can tell the doctor, this is what it feels like to me. This is, there's a direct connection there. If we're doing that with one of our animals, the animal can't tell the vet they're not feeling well. So it has to then be, this is what I observed. This is how I'm interpreting that. And then you relay that to the vet. It's like a game of telephone. You have the opportunity of losing the message there. So having that direct information for the vet can be immensely helpful.
And you are the advocate. You are the eyes and ears for that vet. The vet doesn't know what's going on at home. They're just seeing what's happening in the exam room. So, both Jody and Julie said they've used pictures and they've used video. It's a great tool. It's something to really think about. One of the things you've got to talk about too, maybe, is when you're talking to your vet and the vet doesn't really know you well, because you only go in once a year or twice a year. Dr. Strunk mentioned she likes to see birds twice a year. The cage setup, the diet, the enrichment schedule, all those things are parts of the puzzle that is your bird. And I think it really helps the vet to know those things.
Yeah, and the good news is the Avian first aid kit that you listed has a place for records. So you can have things like any medical history, anything like that. But even things people wouldn't normally think about, like diet, what the cage setup, the cage size, all of that can ultimately have an impact on how your animal is doing. So all of that information can be useful to a vet.
Absolutely. Things that you just do as part of your routine. Maybe your bird is getting a probiotic. Well, it's important for the vet to know that. It's important for the vet to know if you've got them on a diet that has a lot of seed, or a diet that has, or if you're giving a lot of nuts or something, maybe it's an iron storage issue. You've just got to think about if that those pieces of the puzzle, like it's kind of like your veterinarian is the detective and you're the person that goes out and collects the information for the detective so that they can put it all together. um, it's Dawn says one of the clinics that she goes to has a thorough questionnaire that they give you, and it includes diet, housing, supplements. Those things are all great, and if you've got that all done before you even get there, it's a bonus. So part of that too, when we talk about keeping good records, is the weight, getting weight. So I know Jack and I have talked about scale training. And I think down the road we're going to hopefully do a session on scale training and things like that, because it's if you can scale train your bird and you can get a weight on a regular basis, you can keep track of that. It's as easy as just making a chart. And what other things? So Jack, what other things do you think you can expect at the vet, or that you should have? You should want to ask your vet to do.
Yeah, so I think we've already addressed the vet's going to do that visual examination. I have never met a vet for a bird that did not get a weight as part of a visual examination. And sometimes you may need to let your know if you do have a weight measuring protocol at your home. You need to let your vet know how that goes, because the weight your bird has at 8 a.m. when you do that every single day might be different from 3:30 when it goes into the vet's office. And I think this is a good time to remind people that one of the most important things you can do for a weight measurement regimen is to make sure that you're getting that weight at a similar time every day. So if your bird gets weighed before breakfast, make sure you just keep weighing it before breakfast. Now, beyond getting that weight, there are a couple of different tests that your vet may decide to run. Now, if this is just an annual exam and your bird is looking good, and the weight is normal, behavior is normal, appetite is normal, weight is normal, they may stop at a visual exam and a weight check. But they may also decide to do some things like a fecal cytology. It's also called a parasitology. One of the most common things you'll see is checking birds for parasites. And that's going to be important because internal parasites, again, can have a tremendous impact on the body condition and weight of your animal. And, we see that with dogs, we see it with cats. The thing to remember is the birds don't have as much weight to them. So even a slight change to their weight can be incredibly detrimental. Um, a blood panel is going to be really common as well. So a CBC, or a complete blood count and chemistry blood panel, is going to be one of the most common things that you'll see. That's typically going to be used to test for infection. It's going to be used to test for a couple of different things, but it gives you a good all-around view at what's going on internally with that animal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think too, another test that you often, more often than not will see when you go to the vet is a gram stain. It's just something that don't be surprised and don't be alarmed if your veterinarian says, "Oh, I want to do a CBC or I want to do a gram stain." Those are things that are pretty standard. When you're taking your bird for their annual checkup.
Right. And I think for people who are not familiar with veterinarians, the tests can sound really, really scary. It almost seems like, your vet just wants to run some routine tests, and you're just left feeling like, oh God, I fell into an episode of Grey's Anatomy and everything's going terribly, terribly wrong. And all of these are
Mhm.
pretty basic tests. And as long as you know what they're doing and what they're testing for, I think that helps a lot of people know what's going on. I mean, we've advocated multiple times that knowledge is going to be one of the most important tools in your arsenal for caring for your animals. So, a gram stain, it sounds kind of scary. It's a test used by veterinarians to determine different types of bacteria, so they then know what antibiotics to use to treat different things. Because you obviously don't want to try to treat an infection with a medication that isn't going to be effective.
Right. Absolutely. And, Dr. Strunk also mentioned doing radiographs or x-rays. And,
Mhm.
you're looking at bone density when you're talking about a radiograph. And I think that's, again, something that, makes you kind of go, oh, how come? Why are they doing this? But, and it doesn't, Melissa says Zorro's never had an x-ray or been put under. And that's okay. Zorro's, getting around fine. Zorro's been, is a fairly young bird. And so they may not ask for those kind of things until you're talking about a bird that's kind of advanced in age. But it's not something to be scared about. The other thing is you can work on getting your bird comfortable with a syringe, with what a syringe looks like, if they're going to do a blood draw, so that it's not this terribly scary new thing when you go into the vet's office. So that's another piece of training that you could do as well. I'm not advocating that you're taking blood from your bird. I'm just advocating that they're used to syringes. That we're not taking blood from our birds. Quentin mentioned
No,
that this leads to syringe training. And syringe training is a fairly easy training to do.
yeah, I mean, all of these things are pretty easy to do as long as you're working with them beforehand. All of the, you know, exams that a vet may want to do, and your vet may want to do additional exams other than what we've talked about today. Your vet may want to do them for reasons other than the reasons we've talked about today. We tried to give just a base overview so people have an understanding. Um, if there is an aspect of your animal's care that you're just unsure of, you don't really know what it is or why the vet is doing that, ask them. The vet or the vet tech will walk you through whatever it is they are doing, and they will walk you through that at your comprehension level. I think most vets are trained in recognizing that not everybody who has an animal that they're bringing into a vet clinic has years of medical training. So they can break it down to you as easily as they need to, so don't be afraid to ask. I'm happy that we were able to put together a resource here so people have a really generic overview of these terms and these things, but ask your veterinarian about any of these things. And just like we asked Dr. Strunk, if there is something that would be helpful for your vet, for your animal to be trained to do, something that you could be doing with your animal, records you could have, ask your vet about that beforehand.
Absolutely. And Ginny brings up a good point. A gram stain is non-invasive, so we are tossing around a term like that, like, oh, a gram stain, like everybody knows what that is. It's just collecting the droppings off the bottom of the cage or the carrier. You're not asking, your bird to do anything. Well, it's something they do all the time. We all know that because we have to clean that bird room, right? But it's not something that's invasive. But some people might not know that just because they're new to the bird world or they've never, had to experience that at the veterinarians. So it's just all of these terms are things that we put out there. If you've got questions, absolutely feel free to get in touch with Jack or I. And you can also, look them up on your own. You can get a real clear description of what all of those tests look like. So here's the biggie, Jack. We got to talk about what's this going to cost me, right? It's like I've been saying all along. These vets are going to school, getting all kinds of education, and now we've got to talk about payment for that. I'm sure they'd love to volunteer, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
So,
I think that Especially if you're setting up a first time vet visit, if it's not an emergency or anything like that, um, talk to the secretary when you make that appointment on, can you give me an idea of pricing? I can tell you right now that avian vets that specialize in exotics, are typically going to be a little bit more expensive than a dog or a cat vet. Um, a dog or a cat vet is typically going to be more expensive than a livestock vet. Um, but it's all going to depend on the individual veterinarian. So just ask them for an idea of what pricing is going to be before you make that appointment. Now, for those visits, again, I think if your vet could, vets love animals. I am sure that if they could, they would volunteer their services. But at the end of the day, that's not going to pay their mortgage. So they do unfortunately have to charge you. Um, Now, depending on what is going on, you can always ask your vet if there's, a large expense or anything like that. Some of them will set up payment plans, but not all vets are going to do that. And you may want
No.
to know that information beforehand. So if you're setting up for a wellness exam, the first exam that that vet is doing, don't don't hesitate about asking them if we have a major emergency or anything like that. Do you guys set up payment plans? Because you know bird vet visits can very quickly get very, very expensive, because birds hide the signs of illness, as we talked about, and because they are so small, they're so lightweight, they don't have that much mass, they don't have that much blood. So a change in those things can be detrimental very, very quickly. So a vet is going to want to get a handle on them as quickly as possible. So the cost can quickly grow, but that being said, I have encountered avian and exotic vets that were cheaper than some dog and cat veterinarians. So it really does
Mhm.
depend on your the individual veterinarian.
And we've got up here on the screen. Have you got care credit? There are definitely some cards that are set up to cover veterinary medicine expenses. Jody mentioned too that CBEAM, the Center for Bird and Exotic Medicine, where Dr. Strunk is from, has claw plans. There you make monthly payments, and then it's kind of that you can bring your bird in for X number of visits. Care credit is huge. It can make life so much easier, because I'm going to tell you, I mean, those emergency visits. Karen said that in Minnesota, a well bird visit is about $85. So okay, not so bad, but maybe it's a little bit more. When you go in an emergency, it's going to be expensive. There's no two ways about it. So maybe you have a little fund that you keep aside so that in case you do come up against something like that, it's the rainy day fund, it's the vet fund, whatever you want to call it. And as far as the annual exam, that's something that I think when you're creating your budget for the year or the month or whatever, you've got to put that in there. It's got to be a part of what you're budgeting for in your regular expenses. Put it down there next to the grocery expenses, or put it next to your electric bill. It's something that you're going to have to pay for if you're a bird owner once a year. It's just that important. COVID visits are a little different too. We need to touch on that. It's because of COVID, a lot of veterinarians, a lot of clinics are not allowing you to go in with your animals. And this can be ridiculously stressful as a pet owner. But I think, if you can give them that information ahead of time, if it's a wellness visit, you fill them in on this is what's been going on. If you've got a kit, what was that?
Nothing.
We'll see at the end what that was, Jack. So if you've got a kit or a record book that you're keeping, you can just hand that over. When the tech comes out to get your bird, you can just hand that over. So it's all right there. There's no, there's no question about it, no problems, no issues. If it's an emergency, yeah, your heart's going to be in your throat while you wait for that animal to come back out again. But if you've got the information and you can give the vet as much information as possible, it makes things so much better. So COVID's changed life a little bit. And then when you're done at the vet, you've got to sometimes it's a matter of everything's great, having a great year, we'll see you in a year. Other times there's aftercare. So what do you do? So Jack, if you take a bird to the vet, and they tell you he's got to have this, that, and the other, what's the best way, in your opinion, to keep track of that?
So the good news is your vet will usually try to walk you through things, but then they will also give you a full printout or an email that has everything that they are recommending. So if you're ever worried that you've forgotten something, you can always check back with that. And if there's something that you think you're missing that you didn't see on the email, didn't see on the printout, maybe you lost the printout, call the vet's office and just say, here's what we are doing. I just wanted to check and make sure that there was nothing else that I was supposed to be doing. Your vet's office is going to be happy to field those calls because they want to know that your animal is getting better too. So doing everything that the vet recommends to provide for your animal is what they're going to be there for.
Mm-hmm. And I think, prescriptions, if they need a script, sometimes they can be filled at the vet. Sometimes they can be filled at the pharmacy, depending on what it is. And, if you can get it at the vet, don't try to cheap out on this one because the dosage, your average pharmacist is not going to understand. So you kind of want to go with getting your, it's like, oh, well, I'd do this if it was, an elephant. Well, wait a minute. You just need to make sure that that's an issue.
Yeah, I've had that exact issue, and had to sit through about 5 minutes of pharmacist consultation before the pharmacist realized that the prescription they were filling was for a camel. So the dosage was not for me, at a weight we're not going to disclose, but rather for a 1,300-pound camel.
Yeah, it does make a difference. It definitely does. And, you also want to make sure. So this brings us back. Let's circle back around to training again. I feel like we always end up back there, but syringe training is like the best. And I noticed that, Dawn said that it was her bird would take anything out of a syringe as long as it had a little bit of hummus on it. Hey, whatever it takes. Because at this point in time, it's not about pretty. It's not about the best nutrition, unless there are dietary limitations that, you can't give your bird sugary things or whatever. It's pretty much about getting that medication in, whatever you got to do. And if you've got your bird syringe trained, it makes life so much easier. It's not all of a sudden, why is my favorite human coming at me with this thing?
Yeah,
So
I think another thing for people to remember there is, again, if you notice that your animal isn't taking a particular medication, talk to your vet's office and maybe they'll want to prescribe something else, or maybe they'll want to prescribe the same medication but in a different form. You can get a liquid medication if your bird will take that from a syringe. That's great. But I've known birds that don't take things from syringes, but they will willingly eat a single grape or a single blueberry that just has a small pill hidden inside of it. So, you can let your vet know beforehand what is the best method for providing medications for your animal. I guarantee you, if you tell your vet that your bird is syringe trained and can readily take a liquid medication, they will be over the moon thrilled. But, if you know that that's not a thing that you've mastered yet, but there is another way you can get that medication to your bird, just let the vet know.
Absolutely. Jody brings up a great point. Sometimes the bird doesn't trust even if they are syringe trained, because the first time something yucky comes out of that syringe, dang, your trust account just got bankrupted. So you need to kind of every now and then it's got to be not the best woohoo thing coming out of that syringe. And maybe sometimes it's the fireworks, yay, this is my favorite thing to have ever coming out of that syringe, and other times it might not be so great. The other thing to think about, if you've got a pharmacy nearby that will compound medication, they can compound them as different flavors. And if you've got a bird that will do anything for a piece of banana, maybe you can get banana flavored antibiotic. It will cost a little bit more, but you can definitely have that compounded. And Karen says, don't buy over the counter meds at Petco or the corner pet store. She doesn't care who recommends it. And it's true. It might cost you a little bit more, but in the end, I think it's well worth it to go with, a reputable source. And so there's a lot, we've covered a lot tonight. Julie had dog chicken flavor compounded after paying for a round of AB, prefers not, a round of, antibiotics, prefers it not sweet. Yeah, and people don't understand that. Karen says that her birds are booze hounds. They like pina colada flavor. Oh, wait, no, you didn't say that. Karen just said that her grays like pina colada flavor. So, yeah, it's a case by case basis. So, again, we've covered an awful lot. But again, I think it's critical. It's just so, so important. Jack, if you had to sum it up, what would you say about going to the vets?
Okay, so the first thing I want people to know, the vet visit doesn't have to be scary. You should have a good working relationship with your veterinarian. I have heard people with horror stories of, they don't they don't trust their vet, or they didn't like that the vet did something. And open that up as a line of communication, because you should have a good relationship with your veterinarian. You should feel comfortable asking them questions about their care, and your vet should be comfortable at answering that. At the end of the day, you are your main advocate for your animal. So, and your vet knows that as well. I think it's important for people to remember that pet owners and veterinarians they represent two different aspects of animal care. The good news is a veterinarian has years upon years of medical knowledge and study. They have experience. They have worked not just with your animal, but with so many others. So they might see something that you're missing. But at the same time, you have the most information about your bird. You see your bird on a daily basis. You know their diet. You know their energy level. You know their movement. All of these can be critically important for a vet diagnosing something. So do not be afraid to advocate for your animals. And I think when you have a pet owner, and when you have a vet that have that good working relationship, it's a symbiotic relationship, and both people are going to be happy to hear from the other, because the vet's going to be happy that you can provide all of this information about your animal. Maybe you have, here's 6 months of weights I got once a week on this animal I can give you. Here's when I changed enrichment, I can give you records of that information as well. All of that information can be useful. The vet can then give you suggestions on things and know that you are both working to provide optimum care for that animal. So I think don't be afraid of the veterinarian is going to be the ultimate point that I want to drive home, because while they don't take care of your animal on a daily basis, they care about your animal. They want to see your animal doing well. We've talked about vets having to charge for their services. They can't just give it away for free. I will tell you right now, I do not know any veterinarian that is making money hand over fist. They are doing what they do because they like doing it. They love the animals. So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. And I that's really good advice, Jack. And I think we just need to be willing to cooperate. We need to be, we're a team, you and your veterinarian, and the bird is part of that team too. And I think the more you're willing to share with that veterinarian, the more you're willing to give them that information, the better insight they have into your bird. You spend, 24/7 if you're working at home, 24/7 with that bird, but the vet sees them once, twice a year if there's no big issues. So you really want to think about, how am I going to get my point of view across? And I've got to give you some advice. You never want to tell a vet, no, you're wrong. That's not right. This is why he's doing it. Because they're going to just kind of, a wall starts to be built. And that's just not anything that any of us want to see. So I think it's really about communication and cooperation and preparation. So you need to let, Julie brings up a good point. The vet needs to trust the owner. So if you've got, this rapport going on with the vet, they're going to understand that, yeah, this person gets it. This person kind of knows what they're talking about. And then they're more likely to listen to you when you tell them that something's going on, when you share that kind of thing. So I think we have another trivia question, don't we, Jack?
We do. And so for this one, we are going to be giving away a tabletop PVC stand kit. Now, I actually had put these together. So the only thing we are requiring is that the winner be inside the continental US, because otherwise shipping is going to be incredible. But like shipping and everything will be covered. It's a wonderful stand for scale training a bird. You can work with it on a daily basis. So the trivia question we are going to ask, we covered it earlier in the session when we were talking about the tests that your vet may want to run. We talked about a CBC. What does CBC stand for? That's going to be our trivia question for what I think is an absolutely incredible tabletop stand kit. Now, there is some assembly that is required, but it does come together very easily. And then once you put it together, you know how to take it apart if you want to move it somewhere else. And of course, it's little and lightweight, so you can move it around the house without having to take it apart.
And Jack mentioned that it's a great tool for scale training. Really exciting. That if you can get that bird comfortable with that scale, that stand, and then get him on that scale, it's really a win. So Nick, Sheila Maluski, did I say it right? I hope I did. Sheila says a complete blood count. I think she's right. I think she's got it.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Sheila. If you can message us after we're done, and wow, message us after we're done, and Jack will get that.
Message either one of us, and we'll get the information.
There we go. All right, so we've got a couple of announcements, you guys. We have a workshop coming up that Jack and I are going to do on Zoom. It's called BYOP, Bring Your Own Parts Foraging Toy Workshop. It's going to be Saturday, February 13th. So we're not going to mess with your Valentine's Day. It's the night before, and it'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific. It is only $5 to participate in this workshop. And we're going to talk about all the parts you've got at home, how you can use them. We'll talk about foraging. We can brainstorm as a group. I know Quentin, who was on before, has already registered. And Quentin has the most impressive, set of boxes of toy parts, of bins, I mean, if you guys don't get ideas from all the stuff that Quentin has, I would be really surprised. So it's $5. You can register on the Leather Elves website at theleatherelves.net. And there's a place to click and it'll take you right there. So that's February 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So we're going to still keep doing this. You guys are still tuning in. So we're going to keep doing this every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Leather Elves Facebook page. And where else can they find it, Jack?
So every single session that me and Robin are recording, we are putting on the High Redbird YouTube channel. So if you guys haven't already, we encourage you to like the Leather Elves on Facebook. That way you have the opportunity to participate every single Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. But if you miss out, you can always go to High Redbird. There is actually a playlist with all of the sessions that me and Robin have done. So if you are a commuter, if you like to have this sort of information going on in the background, you can, of course, just listen to that there as well. So they will all be put there to make it easier to find, make it easier to share with your friends.
And yeah, all of these things that we're suggesting, you know, checking out the Leather Elves page, subscribing to High Redbird, liking and following the Leather Elves, it's super reinforcing for Jack and I. We really do enjoy doing this and we have fun, and it's been great, like getting to know you guys. So we want to say thank you again for tuning in every week. And next week, we are going to be talking about, I know it's so exciting, avian conservation in action. We're going to have a guest with us. Hopefully we can get updates from the field, and we'll be talking about ways that you guys can support conservation. And wait till you guys see what Jack went to just get. Tell me this isn't ridiculous cuteness.
I was going to say, these little guys
Jack.
are, they are a week old. So I don't know if y'all could tell, 7 o'clock is feeding time, and it's 7 o'clock here. And they are very, very good at knowing what time it is. But yeah, I am currently bottle raising these little babies. So that is what you guys heard. So I hope you guys enjoy that.
If Jack doesn't come back, because really, I probably wouldn't come back if I had a baby goat at my house, right? Tracy, on my screen, it's so true. They're just like,
I have
yeah.
two.
You're not sharing. That's not fair. All right, guys. On that note, I think we're going to sign off. Thank you again for spending your Friday nights with us, and have a great week. And we will see you next week at the same time in the same place. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
I do need to say thank you to my Patreon patrons for helping to make these videos possible. You can find out more by visiting High Redbird on Patreon or clicking the link in the description section down below if you would like more information. Thanks!